Minicamp is over and training camp is around the corner today on Locked On Chiefs.
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
Hey, Chiefs Kingdom, welcome back to another episode of Locked On Chiefs, your daily podcast covering the Kansas City Chiefs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Thank you for always making Locked On Chiefs your first listen of the day. Don't forget, we're free and available on all platforms, including on YouTube as well. I am Chris Clark from Chiefs Corner. You can go find me over at Chiefs Corner. Going to be talking a lot about the salary cap in the coming months, as well as doing some roster projections, who I think has a chance at making this 53-man roster, and maybe even getting into the practice squad, covering a lot of the QB statistics and the team statistics over there as well. Today, we have a lot to talk about. Training camp dates have officially been released by the Kansas City Chiefs. We'll get to that a little bit later on. What are some of the Chiefs' positions that they may need to go make an add at? We're going to talk about that a little bit later, but we're going to start this off with talking about the biggest battles headed into training camp today on Locked On Chiefs. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Go check out FanDuel, and we appreciate their sponsorship. What are some of the biggest battles heading into training camp for the Kansas City Chiefs? There are at least two just on the offensive line alone that we are going to talk about. But I'm going to start really right now on the defensive side of the ball. There are two specific positions, and we're going to talk about one of them a little bit more in depth in the next segment. But the first one I'll start with is cornerback, CB2. We know who CB1 is. That's going to be Trent McDuffie. There's no question there. Have no questions about whether or not he's going to be the number one corner. And the only real question with him is he going to play inside or outside? My guess is outside. That's generally what we've been seeing so far in minicamp and in OTAs. The real question is who's going to be CB2? Right now, it seems like it's Jaylen Watson, but Christian Fulton hasn't practiced very much. They signed him to a 2-year deal for $10 million a year. You would expect that he is going to step in and be that CB2 for this Chiefs team, but he hasn't been able to do that yet. They're taking it slowly with him. They want to make sure he's healthy and ready to go. But right now, that's the big question. Is he going to be a guy that can step in and be CB2? Based on what I've seen from his previous stints in the NFL with the Chargers, I do believe that is the position that they want him to have. They want him to be the starter opposite Trent McDuffie, and then you have to figure out who's going to be CB3 and who is going to play that nickel role when you go into a 3-corner set. I do think that Fulton is going to be the guy that ends up coming out of training camp with that starting role as the second corner, as the second outside corner. Right now, he's been that guy for the past season, and he is slated to be that guy as it stands right now because of the injury with Fulton not practicing very much. That's going to be something to watch when training camp starts. How quickly does Fulton take over that second CB role, and can he hold on to it? Can he stay healthy and be that guy coming out of training camp? The other one on defense that I'm really going to be curious about is who's the starter at defensive tackle next to Chris Jones. We know Chris Jones is going to be one of the guys that starts at that position. That's not a question. He is the leader of this defense, and he is going to be one of those guys that's going to be starting at the defensive tackle position. But the question is, who lines up next to him? Is it going to be a guy in Mike Pennell? They don't have Derek Nottie anymore, so it's not going to be him. Can Jerry Tillery step in and be a guy that's going to start in that defensive tackle position? Is it going to be Omar Norman-Lott, who they drafted this year in the second round? Are they going to make him a starter next to Chris Jones? If they do that, then I think you have to feel pretty good about what that means that they think he can do this season. I don't see that being the case. Maybe that it will be. We'll talk about defensive tackle a little bit more in the next segment, because I do want to move on to the offensive line. This is where you have two of the biggest battles brewing, and this is where it's going to be a lot of fun, and a lot of the focus is going to be for the Chiefs. Let's start on the interior. We already know, obviously, who center, right guard, and right tackle is going to be. There's no questions there. There's a question who could be the backup, or who could be the swing tackle, and we'll get to that probably in a couple of weeks, who we think is going to be that guy. But the reality is right now, you don't know who the starting left guard is going to be. You know who the Chiefs want it to be. They want it to be Kingsley Suamataia, who started for them last year at left tackle for a couple of games, then started at left guard late in the season against Denver and had a pretty decent game against Denver, but this is still a position change for him, something that he's not going to be used to. It's going to be interesting to see how he plays, but you're really not going to get an idea as to where they think he is until you actually see him on the field at training camp, watch him do a couple of drills, see if he's holding his own in that phone booth, and see if he's able to get it going in the right direction for him in his career in Kansas City. Right now, I think he's probably the front runner. I don't know that he's outpaced Mike Caliendo by very much, but that would be my guess, is he ends up being the guy that is going to be the starter. I know what I think the Chiefs want. It's going to be a question whether or not he can beat Caliendo out. You have to hope that he does, because I don't think Caliendo has a ceiling of being above average at that position, where I think Suamataia does. I think Caliendo is going to be average to below average at the position overall. So you have to hope that Kingsley is the guy that ends up winning that position. But the more fascinating one, and the one that everybody wants to talk about, is going to be Jaylen Moore and Josh Simmons. This is a bigger question now than I ever thought it was going to be this season, because Simmons seems to have progressed in his getting healthier and healthier as the weeks have gone on since the draft. The thought process around the draft was that he wasn't going to be a guy that could probably start for you this year. He may need a full season off his leg and trying to just get better and trying to be a guy that can maybe start for you in 2026. Kansas City went out and got Jaylen Moore, gave him a 2-year deal worth $30 million, $15 million a year. That is starter money at the position in the NFL. The reality now, though, is Moore has missed some time because of injury a little bit. He hasn't gotten some of the snaps. Simmons also hasn't gotten some of the snaps because of injury. We know that, but it sounds like they are expecting him to be fully ready to go once training camp starts. He's going to have a month between when minicamp ended and when training camp starts. If he is able to go, he, I think, is going to be in a position where he could actually win that left tackle job, and that would be a huge boon for this Chiefs offense and this Chiefs offensive line, especially going forward past the 2025 season. I like Jaylen Moore. I think that he was brought in to be average to above average at that position, and it's still going to be a great thing to have a experienced guy that can step in and be a backup if need be, or be a starter if need be in any scenario. But Josh Simmons starting year one as a rookie and being a guy that locks down the position and pushes Moore out, especially considering what they've invested in Moore, says a lot, and it could mean a huge thing for the Chiefs offensive line in 2025 and way beyond, because one of the biggest stats, and I know I've said this multiple times, Chiefs have started 5 separate left tackles in 5 separate Super Bowls under Patrick Mahomes. You cannot continue to have that. That is something that they need to get figured out. That's something that you hope can be figured out in 2025. If it happens to be figured out in 2026, that's fine. And if they get back to the Super Bowl, they'll obviously have a 6th and maybe even a 7th in 2026 if they get back in back-to-back years. We will see. But it's definitely a position that they need to get figured out. They have to figure out that left tackle position. And Simmons having a chance to take that position in 2025 would be huge for this team. When we get back, we're going to look at a couple of positions that might need additions on this Chiefs roster right after this. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. I've been using FanDuel to track my favorite matchups, and the app keeps it fresh with daily new promotions and fun ways to bet. It's easy to use, fast to pay out, and makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. Whether I'm placing a same-game parlay or watching a bet ride into the 9th inning, FanDuel makes it feel like I'm part of the action. Are you new to FanDuel? New customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. If you're new to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if the first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. There are several positions that the Chiefs could be looking at trying to make additions. This is really what they need to be focusing on and working on, other than the Trey Smith contract, which we know that they need to be getting done as well. We will be covering that in depth later this week or maybe next week, talking about what they need to get done with Trey Smith. But the reality is Kansas City needs to try to be looking at their roster, looking at what happened in OTAs, looking at what happened in minicamp, and figuring out, are there holes in their roster that they can go address right now? The reason I bring up Trey Smith and the reason it is such a big deal is because if he is able to free up some of his cap space, you're talking almost $23.5 million of cap space that he would be able to free up, probably 15 million, if not more. They're already 10 million under. They figure that they need probably another 2 million to sign their second round pick who hasn't signed yet. They probably need another 3 or 4 million to go throughout the year. So at this point, you would figure that they're probably up against it as far as they are concerned, because the reality is that you only have the top 51 contracts that are going against the NFL salary cap right now. Once the season starts, you have to have all 16 practice squad players, anybody on the IR, anybody on any of the NFI or the PUP lists or injured reserve or anything like that in your 53-man roster. So you definitely need to be figuring that they've already got this thing stretched as far as they can until they get a deal done with Trey Smith. If they can get a deal done with Trey Smith, then it opens things up. Then it gives you the opportunity, okay, can I go look elsewhere and try to find another player at another position of need that I think can step in and maybe give you starter potential, or at least very, very high depth level starter, or a very high depth type player. The biggest position of need still is defensive tackle. That's one of the positions. They signed Jerry Tillery. They have Chris Jones. Obviously, he's going to be their starter. But when you start looking at the number of snaps that the defensive tackles take and the regular rotation that they seem to have at that position, the problem that you have at that position is you don't have a starter next to Chris Jones that you feel like can be somebody that's going to step in and play 700 or 800 snaps and give you the ability to maybe stop the run and give you pass rush as well right now on this roster. You drafted Omar Norman-Lott. If they feel like he can step in and start, that'd be a huge deal for the Chiefs. I'm not sure that I see that right now, but it would be a huge deal if they could get a starter level role out of him in 2025. So to me, when you look at this roster and you look at how it's built, defensive tackle is the biggest position that I think that they ought to be looking outside the roster to see if there's something that they can go do to get it done elsewhere. When you look at the rest of the defense, you feel pretty good about the linebacker position. You feel pretty good at least 4 deep at the linebacker position. You have guys that are core special teamers that can easily be your number 5 linebacker. So that's probably not going to be a need. They have a ton of young corners that are on this roster. So I don't think that that's a position that they're going to be looking at to go make an addition. The only other position I could really see, and I don't see it really being the case on the defense, is safety. I can't imagine that they go and try to bring in another safety because you already have your starters in Cook and Hicks, and I think that they feel comfortable with that. Jamari Conner is likely to play that safety role. They brought in Mike Edwards. I don't think that that's a position that they would look at unless somebody just kind of fell in their laps. Then maybe that's a position that they could make a move at. But when you look at the defensive end position, it's another position where they have some players, but you don't feel great about some of the depth that they have. You have George Karlaftis, you have Mike Dana, you have FAU, who's probably guaranteed a spot on this roster, and you have Charles Omenihu. Past that, do you feel great about the pass rush at that defensive tackle position? Yes, you drafted a guy in Gelati this year who's going to make the roster, so it's likely that they won't make a move on at the defensive end position either, but it is going to be curious to see how many they keep at defensive end, defensive tackle. When you flip it over and you start looking at the offensive side of the ball, I would say that they're probably in a pretty good position across the board. We've talked about the depth that they have at the offensive line position. They have 3 guys that are going to be vying for a starting spot at that left tackle position. And I'm counting Wanya Morris in there just because he's going to be, I think, the swing guy or one of the swing guys. I don't think he's going anywhere. So you've got probably 3 tackles there, plus Jawan Taylor. That's 4. And I think that you have to figure that they're going to have a 5th somewhere. Then you start looking at the interior of the offensive line. You already know who your center is going to be. You know who your right guard is going to be. You would figure that they probably feel comfortable with the guys that they have on the roster for the left guard position. But that's the other thing. I mean, if you had somebody drop, I guess you can maybe look at that one, but you're still looking at a situation where you were probably at least 8, 9, or 10 deep at that offensive line position. So I don't see them making a move there. Running back, it's kind of similar. You have a lot of guys that you feel probably pretty comfortable with. Pacheco, you feel good about. Hunt, you feel okay about. Then you have Rashard Smith, who you drafted this year. Does that mean he's going to make the roster as a 7th pick? No. Carson Steele made the roster last year. Does it mean he's guaranteed a spot? No. Elijah Mitchell was a guy that they signed. Is he guaranteed a spot? I would say probably not, but I still can't see them making a move at the running back position. And wide receiver, it looks like they're at least 5 deep with really good talent at the position. So I don't see them making a move there. Tight end, I don't see it. Travis Kelce is going to be your starter. You know what you have in Noah Gray. Jared Wiley is going to be coming back from injury. You have Breenstool as well. You have all these players, and you don't know what you have in some of the younger guys. So I don't see them making a move on offense. The only position that could factor into how the offense is laid out is, can they go find a guy that gives them – do they find somebody that maybe is a better returner than what they already have on the roster? I think Nico Remigio is a guy that is probably going to be – right now, he's probably slated their number 6 wide receiver because he is their returner. Is there somebody that's better than him out there that could come in and give you more at that position? That's the one caveat on offense, is I do think that if they found somebody that could come in and be a returner that gave them more than Nico did, it's possible that they would be looking elsewhere. But I just don't see a ton of additions that you can make. You can make additions maybe at the defensive tackle position. If you made a trade of a defensive end, maybe you can make a trade there and find somebody there. But you're going to need the salary cap, which all comes back to getting a deal done with Trey Smith. That's something they absolutely have to get done, and they need to get it done as soon as possible. We're going to talk about when training camp actually starts and some of the days that you're going to be able to go see the Chiefs right after this. Training camp dates have been announced by the Chiefs. They start on July 22nd. Veterans and rookies are actually reporting at the same time. They will show up on July 21st at St. Joe. This is a huge departure from what the Chiefs have normally done when it comes to training camp. They've normally had the rookies, the QBs, and injured players show up 3 days before camp opens to get them all situated, get them going in the right direction. But Andy Reid and the Chiefs have chose to do that differently this year. It also seems like they're going a little bit shorter than they normally do when it comes to training camp. They are only going to the first preseason game. I'm thinking that that's in part because they are starting it so much sooner than they normally do. Last year it was later July. This year it's the second to last week of July, so it's a little bit different. I do think that it's going to be interesting to see how Kansas City handles training camp this year. I'm really curious, as we talked about earlier, the camp battles that are going to be going on for the Chiefs, the left tackle position, the left guard position, potentially defensive tackle. Those types of positions are going to move front and center when it gets to training camp. You start looking at the offensive and defensive line. A lot of that is going to play out in St. Joe. If you haven't gone to training camp before, you need to try going to St. Joe. It is an amazing time. Practices start at 9:15. Need to plan on trying to be there at least an hour before, as the lines will get backed up and you will have trouble getting in. Generally speaking, it is extremely busy in St. Joe for training camp, and there is going to be a parking charge. I think it's $7 a day. You also have a charge to get into practice. I think that's also another $5 a day. So a little bit of different things you're going to have to spend money on going to St. Joe. But it is a fun time. You get to see the players up close and personal. You get to see what all they're working on in training camp. You get to see the drills. You get to see who's staying after practice and getting some extra work in. And you also get to have a chance to get player autographs. That's something that you don't get a chance to do very often. And that is something that you can do at training camp. If you just stay after practice, you have the opportunity to take a ball or take cards or whatever you want for the Chiefs to have a chance to sign for you. Lots of different things you can do at training camp. When we get into this off season a little bit deeper, we're going to start talking about different positional groups, how they factor in, how we're going to be looking at them going forward, who is possibly going to be moving on from this team, who's going to possibly be making this team, and who are some of the wild cards that could make this team. That's something that we're going to be talking about later in this week and getting into the next couple of weeks as we prepare for training camp. We're also going to be looking at where the Chiefs sit salary cap wise. We're going to talk about what the Trey Smith deal could look like, because that's still sitting out there right now. And one of the biggest things that is interesting out there is that I do think that the Chiefs are interested in getting a deal done with him. I do think that it does get done. It's interesting because as I was getting ready to record this, it was announced that Baltimore had signed Jire Alexander from the cornerback from the Green Bay Packers. Why that I'm mentioning that now is because it sounds like Kansas City was interested. Little interesting to know that they're still looking at CB as a position that they could potentially want to add players to. That is a position that I would have figured is set for them. Not necessarily set as to who's going to make the team, but set as in you have enough players there. You're going to have a hard enough time trying to figure out who you're going to be keeping. And to bring in a corner of the caliber of Alexander is very interesting, and Kansas City trying to get that done. But that also tells me that they feel comfortable that they're going to get something done with Trey Smith, because I don't think you can have that conversation unless you're getting close to having a deal done with Trey Smith. As I said earlier, his number is $23.4 million against the salary cap in 2024. Sorry. His number is $23.4 million against the salary cap in 2025. That is something that he absolutely cannot play under in 2025. They need to get that figured out. They need to get it taken care of, and it probably will be reduced to maybe $8 to $10 million for a salary cap number in 2025, and then you would have the balance of that as free cap space where you could go out and you could sign somebody else. Maybe a George Karlaftis, a Trey McDuffie. We've talked about those guys getting extensions. Maybe Leo Chenal, or maybe you go out and you make a move and you make an addition at a defensive tackle position, a position that I don't think they have enough talent at right now. And that is something that they've got to be looking at right now. So it is interesting to see Kansas City having interest in Alexander. I was really kind of surprised to hear that. The reality, though, is that this team is trying to get back to winning another championship. This may be Travis Kelce's last season. We will see. I know he's non-committal, and he says that they will get a contract thing figured out in 2026. I will reserve my right to say I don't think he's going to be playing in 2026, but we will see. I think he just doesn't want the distraction for the team. We have a lot more to talk about. We're going to get in depth into this roster, talking about the different position groups. We're going to get in depth talking about the salary cap, and then we're going to get into schedule predictions, how that can turn out this season, how Ryan and I see it, maybe even do a 53-man roster projection before training camp starts and get us an idea as to how it could look before training camp starts, and see how much different it changes right after training camp is over and you're getting into preseason game number 2, preseason game number 3, and where we think that their players could have made a difference in whether or not they can make this Chiefs roster. Thank you all for listening today. We will be back tomorrow.